Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Automation Hour. I'm one of your co-hosts, David Litton. So Automation Hour is every other Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We do have a call for presentations. So if you have a cool process automation idea that you want to share, you can go through the slide deck and hit submit your idea, or you can go to our website, automationhour.com. We do have an exciting new series that this is the first, I guess, episode of the series that will be coming out. So today, Eric Smith will be kicking us off, but we have it lined up all the way until January 19th with Francis coming back for another presentation. So we've got it lined up for quite a while, but after that January 19th, we're going to be looking for some additional presentations. So if you've got something that you're thinking you might want to present on, go fill out the form. We'd love to have you present on Automation Hour. So make sure there's links on this slide deck. There's also links on either the Success Community or our blog, Automation Hour, and you can go register for these webinars there and make sure you don't miss them. And if you're unable to make it, you can always get the recording afterwards. So logistics. All lines will be muted for this. We have the chat function though, so we can answer any questions you might have throughout. And if it's a quick question, we might, Rakesh or myself or Eric might answer it mid-presentation, either through the chat or stop the presentation and just provide a quick update, or we'll wait till the end of the presentation to answer it. So if anybody's watching this recording or something comes afterwards though, please follow up in the Success Community of Automation Hour, and one of us or somebody in the community will love to get back to you and help you out with whatever question you have. And once again, the recording will be posted after the session, so if you want, on our YouTube channel, which is also embedded onto our website of Automation Hour. So definitely check us out in the Success Community as well as on our website. And then big thank you to our sponsor, Concrete.io. They've been sponsoring the webinar since its beginning. And here are your co-hosts, Rakesh, myself, and Jen. Jen, unfortunately, is sick today, so she won't be with us, but we look forward to having her on the next one. And our presenter today is Eric Smith. I know I've learned quite a lot from Eric just by seeing him on Twitter as well as reading his blog. So really excited for Eric to get on Automation Hour today and teach us some of the cool tips and tricks and learn how to use Process Builder from the ground up. So definitely, whether you're a beginner admin learning Process Builder and Flow to somebody who is experienced, definitely recommend looking at the content Eric is putting out there, because I know every time Eric posts a new blog post, I'm learning something new myself. So always good content there. So with that, I will pass you, presenter.
Great. Okay, you should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
I will switch to the, there we are. Got my slideshow up. I'm really excited to be able to do a presentation for you folks today. I think I've sat in on or played back the recording of most of the sessions you guys have done since you've started this series, and I will say I've learned a lot as well. So I'm always open to learning new things, excited to find out new things with Salesforce, and excited today to share a few things with you as well. In my current role, I'm a director of service delivery for a company called GWI. We're an internet and telecommunications provider in the state of Maine. I have over 40 years of experience working in the technology industry. I consider myself a Salesforce super user. I don't have an active Salesforce role in my company, but I have done a lot of administration and development to help along business processes at GWI. I also have my own blog, Eric's Playground at WordPress.com, and I have my LinkedIn and Twitter addresses up there as well. Another thing I'm very proud of is I've created a utility called the Process Builder OneView Automation Toolkit, and if you're interested, I have a link there. You can go look at that at a later time as well. But jumping into today's presentation, I wanted to go over some of the basics in Process Builder, some of the building blocks that you have to put the processes together, and hopefully a couple of the tips I'll give you today will make you a flow superstar in no time. And I'm also going to touch briefly on a special but small visual workflow that you'll be able to use, and it'll work with any of your process builders. So in Process Builder itself, we're going to review the object a Process Builder acts on. We're going to look at the criteria we use to control our process, and then the actions which we have the Process Builder perform for us in our Salesforce organization. Starting Process Builder, you can find it in Setup. I usually just go type in Builder in the search box in Setup, select Process Builder, and I'm off and running. A Process Builder process, when you first create one, you can select to start it or invoke it when a record changes, or if it's invoked or called by another Process Builder. And if any of you have taken a peek at the Winter 18 pre-release out there, there's going to be a third option as well on having an outside trigger start a Process Builder for you. So that's going to be pretty exciting, but coming in the next release. Each Process Builder is meant to act upon a single object in Salesforce, and you can have it act upon that object either when you first create a record for that object, or when a record is created or changed or edited in that object. The object you select or operate on, it could be a standard object like an opportunity or an account, or it could be any custom object that you may have created in your organization. And another option when you first identify your object is you can specify there whether you want the Process Builder to run only when a new record is created or when a record is either created or updated. The next building block is the criteria. And a criteria is where you decide whether or not certain actions are going to take place, and also how your process is going to flow. You can specify individual conditions. You can even create a formula to run to determine whether or not to execute your actions. And as I have here on the screen, almost all of the options that you can select in Process Builder, whether it's a function, a field, an operator, you have pick lists available to you. And they're very handy because they'll reduce the amount of typing you need to do when you're creating your process, and it really helps to avoid errors. And you know you're only getting valid choices when you're picking something off of one of the pick lists that's presented to you. Another thing that I think is helpful with criteria in your Process Builder, I think it's always good practice to include a question mark in your criteria name, because that's really what you're doing. You're asking a question, and the answer is either going to be true or false. So I do find it makes the flow a little more logical or readable if you include that question mark in your criteria name. The example you see on the screen here, I happen to be using a formula as my criteria. I want to know if the amount of my opportunity is negative. So my formula says I selected the amount field from the opportunity, and I said less than 0. And that's either going to be true or false. The conditions also let you, instead of a formula, you can list various conditions, and that's usually done by selecting fields, an operator, and then something you're comparing it with. In this particular case, I'm looking at the opportunity amount. I selected greater than a value of $500,000, and that the opportunity itself is closed won. So my criteria there is sometimes we see that's a criteria for a big deal. Is it over $500,000 and have they closed it yet? And if that's the case, then I may want to execute some actions. The final method that you can use in your criteria is you just tell the system, I'm really not checking anything, just go perform these actions for me. Do it no matter what. And I usually put, when I have one of those, I put just do it with an exclamation point in my criteria box. And so I always know that it's not testing anything, it's just going to always execute those actions for me. Now the actions themselves, there's 9 different types of actions that are predefined or available to you in Process Builder. You can execute an Apex clash, you can create a new record, send an email, execute a visual workflow, send a chatter post, call another Process Builder. You can execute a quick action, things like log a call, create a child case, or other system or custom actions. You could submit a record to an approval process, and I think probably the most commonly used one is you could update a record, update fields or make changes to a record. And so these are the basic building blocks: is the object, the criteria, and the actions. And I thought it would be helpful, especially for folks just starting out, to really look at some real-life examples of, how have I used some of these in my business? What type of criteria have I put in place? What type of actions am I using? So I'm going to jump over to one of the process builders in my system. This one is one that I run on opportunities for record changes. And the particular criteria I want to show you is I'm looking to see if an opportunity is missing a previous contract end date. And I have a set of conditions, but in addition to those conditions, I'm also able to customize the logic. I don't have to say all of them true or any of them true. I can actually define my own logic for this. So in this particular case, what I'm checking to see is my field active, is it true? And either my opportunity type is renewal no changes, or my opportunity type is renewal with changes. And I want to make sure my previous contract date is null. Do I not have a value there? And is my reminder field, does it equal a string PED? And that's basically an update I do to say, once I've done this, I really only want to do it once, so I update that field. So my criteria is checking a few different things in my opportunity record, and then it's going to go and execute a series of actions. And in this particular case, I'm sending an email alert. That's fairly straightforward in Process Builder. When you create an email alert, we're basically going in saying do an email alert. We can name our action. And then we can select from any number of email alerts that we may have already created in our organization and pick the email template or alert that we want to send out. So it's that easy to create an email alert in Process Builder. Another thing I'm doing here is I'm updating a field. I'm setting this reminder field to be that string PED that I was checking for before, because I really only want to do this once. And the final thing I'm doing is I'm actually creating a new record. And this one's pretty powerful, being able to add records to other objects in the system. And in this particular case, I'm creating a task. And this task, I'm actually giving it to the owner of the opportunity, and I'm filling in a few fields like today's date. I'm providing a description and a priority and a few other things. And I'm relating it back to this opportunity. In other words, I'm giving them a task to say, please go in and put the previous contract end date in. So when I see an opportunity that's missing it, the opportunity owner will get a task to actually go and fix that for me. So that's a piece of automation that's used to try and keep my data clean. Another example here is if we look at the previous one, new service reduction. In this particular criteria, I'm using a formula to, rather than straight conditions, to test whether I want to execute my action or not. I'm looking at the value of the opportunity source field. I want to know if this other field, CSD rep, has changed, or if the prior value was blank or unassigned. And if that's the case, if that's true, in this particular case, my action is launching a visual workflow. And when you launch a visual workflow, like an email, sending an email, you go and select a previously created flow that you have in your system, and then it prompts you to add any input values that you might have in your visual workflow. In this case, I had one, the ID of the opportunity, and that just gets passed into the input variable in the flow with the ID of the opportunity that we're operating on. Another example, I will go back to this process builder. I have one here. Is a new opportunity created. Now this one's pretty simple. Now when you first set up a process builder, you notice you had the option of saying only execute when a record is created or when a record is created and edited. Rather than create two separate process builders for myself, one when the record is created and another one for created or edited, I just set up a process builder that anytime there's a new or changed record and opportunity, run this process builder, but I have a criteria here that I only want to do certain actions if it's new, if it's a newly created record. So my criteria is, all it's checking for is this a new record? And if that's the case, I'm doing a couple different actions. I'm setting a value by updating the record, and I'm also calling another process builder, or what's called an invocable process builder. And invocable process builders allow you to create building blocks. Rather than put all of your information in one process builder, you can break them out. Another useful use case for invocable process builders is one that you may want to repeat. Call a particular process builder more than once or from more than one other process builder. So you only have to create it once when you create an invocable process. And all you pass to it is the reference to the record or the object that you're working on. And let's go take a look at the invocable process builder. What I have here is I got a few other criteria that I'm checking, and then I have a couple other actions that I'm going to do here. So this basically allows me to get a little more involved or get a little more complexity in some of my criteria. Rather than try and put it all in the original process builder, I can call another process builder that makes a few more criteria checks for me, checks a few other conditions. So in this particular case, if it's a new customer, I don't really want to do anything. If it's a service, what I call a service reduction, I don't really want to do anything. But then if I get to the point that neither of those are true and I have an inactive account, then I'm doing a couple different things here. And I have another email action. And this is a new one here, is being able to actually put a chatter post out there. So in this case, if somebody is creating an opportunity that's missing some fields or trying to create an opportunity on an inactive account, and actually post to a chatter group of Salesforce administrators, and it gives them some information here saying, hey, there's some information about the account and the opportunity. Somebody's trying to create an opportunity on an inactive account. You may want to take a look at this. So that's my invocable process builder. Now, one of the things you may have noticed here was I did a lot of different actions. I updated some records, I created a new record, I sent some emails, I posted to Chatter, I called a visual workflow, I called another process builder. But you may have noticed that one of the things I'm doing here is I'm doing nothing. And that's going to be my first tip, is how do you tell Process Builder you really don't want to do anything? I don't want to execute any actions if my criteria is true. I just either want to exit it or go on and check the next thing on my list. So I'm going to step through telling you how you tell Process Builder to do nothing. So again, going back and looking at our building blocks, the object, the criteria, the actions. The criteria node gets evaluated in Process Builder. It's always going to be true or false. And from there, the flow is either going to continue to the next criteria node if the evaluation was false, or it executes one or more actions if the criteria result was true. And then after your actions occur, you can either stop your Process Builder or you can tell it to evaluate your next criteria. And in the example we just looked at, depending upon the logic and what you're trying to do, there are going to be times where if your criteria is true, you just want to stop. You want to exit your Process Builder. You don't need to go on and do anything else. But in order to stop, the first thing Process Builder requires is that we have at least one action. And by definition, an action does something. It performs an action. So here's an example of an action. Now, some of you have started working with Process Builder. You may have done this. I've done it before. I've seen people do it. I need to put an action in, so what am I going to do? Well, I'll do a record update, and I'll just set a field equal to itself. So that really doesn't do anything, doesn't change any data, but at least I'm putting an action in so I can get to that next step, which is to stop my Process Builder. But this does seem a bit cumbersome to have to do this each and every time you want to exit your flow or really not do anything. So what we'd like to do is to find a way to create a reusable action that you can easily put in any of your Process Builders and have it do nothing. If we go back, let's take a look. These are the 9 actions that are available in Process Builder. Well, we need to pick one of them, but they're all designed to do something. Which one are we going to pick? Which one can we use to make it easiest to build our Process Builders? There's a few different ways that we could build our do nothing action. One, and I've tried this, is to create an invocable Process Builder with a single criteria node that will always evaluate defaults. But I would still, even in that invocable Process Builder, have to include some type of dummy action that would never get executed. And I found one of the drawbacks to doing that type of invocable Process Builder is because a Process Builder operates on a single object that you have to tell it ahead of time, you would need to build one of those for every different type of object you want to have a Process Builder on that you want to add the do nothing action for. Another option I looked at was to create an Apex class that doesn't do anything and call that. But that really requires that you have code and not just clicks. And when you have an Apex class and code, you then need test classes. You got to deploy it from a sandbox, and it gets more and more involved. I wanted to find something a little simpler. So here's what I think is the best option. It turns out that visual workflow will allow us to create a single action, and it can be called from any Process Builder on any object, and it will do all of the nothing that we need to have done. So I want to step through how to build this visual workflow. It's very simple. It's going to only have one element, and once it's created, you can use it anywhere you need it in your Process Builders. Like Process Builder Visual Workflow, the editor is found in Setup. If you select Setup, type Flow into the search box and select Flows, it takes you into the Visual Workflow editor. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new visual workflow. We do that by clicking on New Flow. And then I'm going to define one variable that I'm going to use in my workflow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select Resources and say Create a new variable. In this case, I'm going to call it Answer. I'll put my description in. This is just a placeholder. I just need to have a variable in there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the palette and select the assignment element. And we just drag the assignment element onto the canvas. Once we've done that, a dialog box will come up and ask us to fill in some information for that element. I'm going to name it Do Nothing. I'll give it a description. The flow is to allow the creation of an action and process builder that won't do anything. It's always a good idea to, and Jen will drive this in every chance she gets, really do want to include descriptions in Salesforce wherever they're available. It really does. It makes it easier for you and your successors later on to understand what you've done when you go back to look at something and say, oh, what did I do there? Why did I do this? So do yourself a favor and always use descriptions. A little bit of extra typing could save you a lot of time later. So in this step, I'm just going to say assign my variable answer a value of nothing. So I just have to have something in my assignment element. I'm just going to say nothing. Just make it equal to that, and I'm good to go. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to set this element as the flow start element by clicking in the upper right-hand corner. So you could have a bunch of different elements in your flow all connected together, but one of them has to be the first one. And you do that by clicking in the right corner and saying, this is my first element. Once I've done that, it's going to say, okay, I want to save my flow now. I'm going to name it. I'm going to call it Do Nothing. Again, I'm providing a description. This flow is here, so I can create a Do Nothing action and process builder. And once I've named it, it's going to say it's saved, but it's going to give me a warning message, and we really don't need to worry about that. It's just a general warning that's saying, hey, this isn't connected to anything. That's one of the things Visual Workflow will do, is to see if you have any orphan elements out there. Well, in this case, since there's only one element, there's nothing to connect it to. So it's okay. It still can be saved. It's still going to work. And the last thing we want to do is, once we've created this visual workflow and saved it, is you do need to activate it. If you don't activate it, Process Builder won't know that it's there or available for it to use. So you do want to click on the Activate. Now when I go into Process Builder and I want to have something that does nothing, I need to pick Flow as my action type, and I select my Do Nothing flow. And I have an action, and I can reuse this action anywhere I need it in any of my process builders. So if I'm creating one, we select Flow, call it something. I always call it Do Nothing, because I always know what it does, nothing. And I select my flow called Do Nothing. And that's it. So if you take the time to create this one visual workflow, it'll always be available to you in any of your process builders, just to save that next step where you just want your flow to exit. So what I like to say is basically your Do Nothing visual workflow is going to give you nothing for something. In other words, it's going to do all the nothing you need it to do.
And Eric,
yes.
We did have a question come in saying, why do we want to add a Do Nothing to our process builder again? I didn't quite get it. So I'm not sure if you're about to cover that in a little bit more detail, but if you want to just kind of cover that again.
Yes. Let's take a look at one of my examples here. If I go back to this particular process builder, my opportunity record changes. The very first criteria I have in there is, do I want to go any further? Is there a reason I might want to just exit this flow and not go and look at the rest of the steps? In this particular case, I have a formula I'm checking here. I want to see, I created a custom setting that I can set when I want to bypass some of my process builders, and if I check for that setting as my first criteria, it knows not to run the rest of it. And I also check a second criteria here is if the user ID is equal to this particular ID. I've installed an App Exchange app in my organization called Rollup Helper. And when Rollup Helper is updating records, I don't want these process builders to go and rerun and check all my other criteria. That really doesn't need to happen. So in this case, if either one of those conditions is true, I really just want to do nothing. I'm going to exit my flow and not go on. The other way it can be used, as I mentioned, was additional logic. Now this is the invocable process builder that is called by my record changes process builder. Rather than try and build a whole bunch of criteria nodes into my original one to check a lot of different conditions, when I jump out to my other process builder there, I can create additional criteria there that I want to check to see if I want to execute my actions or not. So in this particular case, I've called this process builder, but I'm looking here if my account ID is blank, or my opportunity type is a new customer, or if this other field is blank, then I really don't need to do anything else. So I want to exit my flow at that point, not do anything. I have another test here. If my opportunity type is a service reduction, or my opportunity type is a service reduction offset, I really don't need to execute my steps either. So this just gives me a way of putting some additional criteria in there to say, hey, if this is the case, don't do anything. You don't need to go on and finish the process builder. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. And then a similar related question was by Dawn asking, how did you get the evaluate the next criteria option to show instead of just stop?
How do you get it instead of just stop? If I'm not, when I'm editing, you click on either stop or evaluate the next criteria. When you're editing or working in your process builder, it's just one of the options that you have. Either go on and check the next one or stop. So that's some of the control that you have in how your process builder runs. Some conditions, if they're true, that's the end of your process. Other conditions that if they're true, you do something, you say, okay, pick up where you left off. I have other things in my process builder that I want to check, and that's really important in this one. Here, my opportunity record changes, if I go down through that, almost all of them, they're doing something, then going on to my next criteria. Check something, do something, check something, do something. And that goes all the way down to a few things at the end. I have one here that I exit, and then I also have one with some scheduled actions as well, and I'll go over those in a minute here. But that gets selected by clicking that evaluate, and it's either going to be stop or evaluate the next. Any other questions at this point, or do you want me to move on?
I think we're good to. Sorry, trying to read the question. Somebody was just asking if it, or you move on. I'm going to ask them to clarify.
Okay, so. Great. Scheduled actions. Actions normally, most of the examples I showed you, they're executed immediately. But in some cases, you may want to schedule an action to occur at a later point in time. You have a time lapse between when your criteria gets evaluated or your record gets updated and when you want the action to happen. And these are called scheduled actions. An example I've seen, you may want to use Process Builder, for example, to email an opportunity owner 90 days after the opportunity closes with a reminder to follow up with the customer. So you can kind of have those things kicked off and scheduled right at the time an opportunity gets created or updated. I have an example here. This is one that I use in my own system. It's my opportunity stages. My salespeople have the ability to set a stage of future, which means it's going to be way down the road that I'm going to work with this customer. But I don't want things to stay in future or stay in future forever. So I have a process builder that goes and says, hey, they've put a close date out there way out in the future. They've set the opportunity stage to future. But what I want you to do when they do that is 183 days, that's roughly 3.5 months, 4 months, 183 days before that close date, reset that opportunity back to a stage called need identification. In other words, it's not going to be future anymore. So this might trigger some other things that cause them to appear now in some reports that they're looking at or things they need to follow up on. So although they can create an opportunity that says, I'm going to ignore this to sometime in the future, the system now has the ability to bring it back in front of them at a certain point in time. And that's a good example of a way that you can use a scheduled action. Now, I actually went back and forth with somebody today on the success community. I think it may have been process automation or process builder success community. They were having some issues with scheduled actions. They weren't coming up. They couldn't see them. There are some special cases where they're not going to be available to you. And for somebody just starting out with process builders, it can be frustrating to go, well, why isn't it there? And here are 3 special cases where you really are not going to see your scheduled actions. One is right in the very beginning of your opportunity, of your process builder. If you select the advanced option to say recursion, you'll never get the ability to do a scheduled action if that advanced option is turned on. Another place you won't see scheduled actions is anytime you create an invocable process builder. And those you can only do immediate actions, not scheduled actions. And the third one, and this can catch people too, is the advanced option for your criteria. There's an advanced option that says, do you want to execute the actions only when the specified changes are made to the record? And that has to be checked yes in order to use scheduled actions. So if it's any one of those 3 things, you may not see them there. So good idea to check those if you think you should be seeing them and you just don't see them there. Another thing to keep in mind with scheduled actions, if I go back to that opportunity record changes process builder I only had one criteria that had some scheduled actions, and I had it at the very end. And one of the reasons for that is when you have a scheduled action, you can't continue to evaluate the next criteria. After any group with scheduled actions, you can only select stop at that point. So that's something to keep in mind as to how your process builder flows, that as soon as you put a scheduled action in and that criteria ends up being true, the process builder will stop and nothing else after that will get evaluated. Rather than go into a lot of details on these now, it is a little more of a complex topic. I have included a couple links in the presentation. One, considerations for scheduling process actions. That's a link to some of the Salesforce documentation, which gives you a good overview on that. And another one of your hosts, Rakesh, has an excellent blog post. Actually, has a bunch of them on Process Builder, but this particular one, he's done a very good job in explaining how to do multiple scheduled actions in a single process. So if you're interested in learning more about it, I would recommend going to his blog, going through this post, and I think you'll pick up some good tips. And speaking of tips, I have another one for you, and this one is a little trick I came up with to tell Process Builder on a scheduled action that you want to wait for less than 1 hour. And this is going to tell you how to do that. How am I going to tell Process Builder to wait for less than 1 hour? Why did I want to do this? In my role here at GWI, I manage a bunch of project managers. And one of the things I do is I assign opportunities to them to work. And there have been times when I'm going through a list of opportunities, I assign one to project manager A, another one to project manager B, and a couple minutes later I go, oh, wait a minute, maybe I want to give this one to somebody else. And I found that I was changing my mind from time to time, and all of these automation tasks had already been kicked off once I made the initial assignments. I said, really, what I want to do is I want to wait on these actions. Just wait for 5 minutes in case I change my mind. Give me a chance to pick somebody different before my notifications get sent out. Seems like it should be pretty straightforward. When we look at scheduled actions in Process Builder, we can select the number of hours or days before or after a particular date. Can't do minutes, but I'm a pretty smart guy. I studied math, and I go, well, 5 minutes, that's 5/60th of an hour, and it works out to 0.083 minutes. Perfect, I have my answer. So I put in 0.083 hours to get my 5 minutes, and Salesforce says, oh, not so fast, buddy. We're not going to let you do that. You can only select a whole number of hours or a whole number of days in Process Builder. But I still want to tell it to wait only 5 minutes. What are we going to do? Came up with an idea, and that light bulb did go off just like that. So I can tell Process Builder to wait for 1 hour after any field that has a time value. So what if I had a time field that was always 55 minutes ago? 1 hour from 55 minutes ago is 5 minutes. So I can tell Process Builder to wait for that 1 hour. All I need to do is to create a custom formula field that's always going to be 55 minutes ago. And that's pretty straightforward. It can be done with a formula field that uses the now function. In order to do that, you have to understand how to subtract minutes from the value given by the now function. Date time fields in Salesforce are stored as decimal values. The whole number piece of the number specifies the date, and the decimal portion of the value specifies the time. So keeping that in mind, I can make my formula work correctly by specifying my minutes as the fraction of a day. So in this case, a minute is 1 day divided by 24 hours, and a day divided by 60 minutes in an hour. So if I put that information into my formula, I now have a formula for 55 minutes ago, which is now minus 55 times 1 divided by 24 divided by 60. That's always going to be 55 minutes before what the current date and time is. So now when I set up my Process Builder, I can now say execute my actions 1 hour after 55 minutes ago. So I'll show you how to set up your own formula field to do this. Many of you have probably created custom fields in an object before. If you haven't, this is a good step-by-step to take you through that. To create the new formula field, first thing you select is Customize. In Setup, select the object you want to add the custom field to. In this case, I'm doing it in Opportunities, and select New. And we want to tell it the type of the field I'm creating is a formula field. So I select Formula and then Next. I give the field a name. I'm doing this example, I want to do one that's, I want to wait 15 minutes, so we're going to try and create a formula for 45 minutes ago. So I give my field a name, and I give my field a type, date, time. Now to create the formula, in the formula editor, the first thing you want to do is select Advanced Formula. And the reason for that is if you select Advanced Formula, you're now given a pick list of functions you can select from. And again, like in Process Builder, it's always best to use the system pick list whenever possible rather than try and type something in by hand. You really can reduce your chance of typos and errors when you do that. So I'm going to select the now function, which returns a date time value representing the current moment. I'm going to tell it to insert it in my formula by selecting Insert Selected Function. And then I finish out the rest of my formula. In this case, for 45 minutes ago, I'm going to say 60 minutes minus 15 times my 1 divided by 24 divided by 60. Another good practice before you go on to the next step, it's usually a good idea just to check the syntax of your formula, make sure you're not missing a parenthesis or have something else wrong, and there it'll tell you right away. The next step in creating a field is field level security. It's usually okay just to accept the defaults in this step, so just click Next and go on to the final step, which is, do you want to put this field on any of your page layouts? We're just using this internally in Process Builders. Nobody needs to see this field, so I usually turn off the checkbox on Add Field so it doesn't show up in anybody's layout. And I click Save. And I now have my formula that can be used to tell Process Builder to wait any number of minutes that you want before executing its scheduled actions. So in this formula, just substitute the 15 for the number of minutes you want to have it wait, and you have a formula you can use in your objects to have Process Builder just do a brief delay before it goes on to the rest of its actions. That's all I had to present today. I'd love to show any other examples or answer questions that folks have. Fire away, Rakesh, David. Let me know what people are thinking.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. All right. I think we've got most of the questions right now so far answered, so we'll sit tight and see if any additional questions come in. All right. We got our first one. One of the process builders that you showed, Eric, was quite long, but you split it out to a different process builder at some point. What is a rule of thumb for when to split out a process builder into another process builder?
I'd hate to see one get more than 50 nodes. You get trade-offs between the amount of time it takes to load and edit a process builder. It's always been good practice to try and keep all of your changes in a process builder for a single object in one process builder, because one of the challenges you have with process builders is Salesforce doesn't let you specify the order in which they execute. So if you had 4 different process builders that all operated on the account record, you can never determine which one's going to operate or execute before the other one. So it's good practice to combine them into a single process builder if you can. But once it gets to be a certain size, then I think it's a good idea to start splitting out into invocable process builders. That way, you're controlling the order that you have things execute. You're not letting the system do it in an order that you can't control.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the pieces that I've personally noticed when I have a process builder that gets really long is sometimes after you hit about 10 criteria, it can start to take a little bit longer for it to load, and just kind of a speed thing going on there. So sometimes if you really do have a long process that is going to actually be 50 nodes, then there might be some pieces of that you could definitely send out into a different process.
Yes.
That kind of are grouped together so that you can manage those once, like you've done right there, as opposed to adding an extra. Yeah.
And,
so
I said execute invocable processes. I've got 3 of them there, and as other requests come in from the users, say, hey, can you do this for me on an opportunity record? This way, I can then start to create invocable process builders to take care of that use case and just add it in here as another thing in my list of invocable processes rather than having to keep building it all into this one really, really big one.
Exactly. It just cleans it up a little bit, makes it easier for you to maintain, as you mentioned, and easier for you to deal with those incoming requests from users, whether it's to update an existing one or to create some new additional functionality.
Correct.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think that is all of our questions right now. We'll sit tight and see if anybody else has any others. All right. So when you have a process builder on object 1 with a lookup field to object 2, I'm having a hard time getting a change in field on object 2 to trigger a process builder to run on object 1. So I think to rephrase that and give you a little bit of time to maybe read it on your screen. So if we have I guess maybe so object 1 has a lookup to object 2, so maybe object 1 would be a contact, account would be object 2. So if we're having a change on the account, having that trigger a process builder to run on the contacts page.
Yeah, that's actually a common, I think that's a common use case, and I know I've done that in a few of my process builders. I can't remember which one right now, but what I usually do in a case like that is you could have a cross-reference formula field in that object number 1 in the process builder. So in this case, let's just use account and contact as an example. So let's say if the contact's phone number changes, you want to make a change in your account record. What you would do is in your account record, you would create a formula field that is nothing more than the lookup to the, well, you'd have to pick the right contact there, but you would have a lookup to a field in the second object. So if you had a formula field that says, I'm going to be the value of whatever the value is in this second object, then when it changes in your first object, your process builder will kick off.
I think if you could do a kind of temporary add immediate action where you've got the does account have a top ID, maybe let's add an action and kind of show what that would look like. Because I think there's also, so when you have a lookup like that, it's going to function a little differently. So if you want to do an update record, they have the option under the record type here, which is what type of record you want to update. We're on an opportunity, so if we wanted to, what would be a good child object?
The account. How about the account that the opportunity is?
Do you have a contact lookup on, or a contract, or something where there possibly could be multiple?
So I have a whatever contract is associated with this opportunity.
Just scroll down a little bit on there. And under the contract, click back on the contract to see the list of all the related records. And I think there's going to be, we probably look for task maybe, and that might just kind of be the same. So you see where it says the _R? Yes. That's going to be the related objects to opportunity, where that lookup is not on the opportunity itself, but that's an object with a lookup to opportunity, and it will search for those records. So you could update all of the related records that way, and it will go search and find that record, and you could put a filter on it to say only.
Right, that's where you would use your conditions right here. Yep.
So it's a little confusing to get to it, and it's not very clear what that is
Yep.
because the double underscore R is definitely more of a Apex kind of coding terminology as opposed to admin friendly. But that's what that's doing there.
Yeah, in this case, it allows you to update multiple related records. The other option, when you have a one-to-one, like the account and an opportunity, if you wanted to have something trigger on your opportunity process builder when something on the account changes, that's where you would probably have a formula field in your opportunity
Yep.
that's pulling that value from the account record.
Exactly. So it definitely depends on what the scenario is, but I think both
Yep.
one of those two solutions should solve um, whatever you're trying to do with that cross object updating.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question because although your process builders are built on a single object, your business rules are going to involve multiple objects most of the time. So you do need to know how to connect them.
All right. I don't think we have any other slides. I know we've got about just 2 minutes left before we hit the top of the hour. A lot of good feedback. One person asked if we're going to share the slides. Yes, we will be sharing slides. We're going to make a post on the success community that will be pretty much just linking to the Automation Hour website. So if you check back on the Automation Hour website, should be later today or shortly after today, and you'll see the updated video and slides from today's presentation. So I don't see any other questions coming in. So I guess we'll end it here. Eric, thank you so much for the awesome presentation. Really enjoyed it. I'm sure based off the feedback that people have posted in the comments that they've gotten a lot out of this. So thanks for your time today.
Well, that's great. I was glad to take part and look forward to sitting in on more of your presentations. Have a great day, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for joining. Have a great weekend.